the forest lake in a high-profile manner. In front of many freshmen, they announced in a high-profile manner that they directly invited the guard team to compete in this time's fire energy hunting competition. You use this battle to determine the final outcome. The breaking news, like locusts sweeping across the border, reached the ears of many students participating in the fire energy hunting competition in a very short period of time. For a moment, the faces of many old students who had not yet been eliminated immediately sank, feeling that they had been provoked. The freshmen who had been bullied badly during this period were stunned, and then they were overjoyed and shouted, "Boss Xiao Yan is going to stand up for us freshmen. Why don't you guys hurry up and help us?" For a moment, most of the forest was shaken, and countless students, whether freshmen or old students, rushed towards the lake. These little guys can really make a scene. With a bit of a smile, Elder Su took out a gourd, took a sip of wine, sat cross-legged on the top of the giant tree, and looked ahead from a distance. The entire forest was within his perception. "Haha, Lao Su, don't forget our bet." The elder in blue on the side also smiled leisurely and said, "Luo Sha from the Black Evil team and Lin Feng from the White Evil team are both dueling cultivation and have extraordinary strength. I'm afraid the boy you are optimistic about will suffer some blows." Elder Su was calm and said with a chuckle, "Then we'll see." On the empty forest land, Xiao Yan and the other two sat cross-legged with their eyes closed. The entire forest fell into silence. However, the slightly depressing and low atmosphere showed the coming storm here. On one side of the lake, there were a large number of students gathered to watch the game, both freshmen and old students, but they were clearly divided into two teams. The silence lasted for who knows how long. At a certain moment, Xiao Yan quietly raised his head, he looked at a corner of the forest, and spoke lightly, breaking the mood. Seniors, now that you are here, stop hiding." Hearing his words, Shunair and others suddenly opened their eyes. And at this moment, a voice sounded faintly from behind the forest. "Haha, he is indeed the leader of the freshmen of this class. He is said to be a once-in-a-century thorn, but he can detect our traces even from such a long distance." Having been pointed out by Xiao Yan, those who arrived had no intention of hiding it. They immediately laughed, showed off their momentum, and walked out of the forest. 1, 2, 3. One after another, figures filed in and walked to the lake, showing off their majestic momentum. The person with the lowest strength among them had a cultivation level around the 7 stars Great Fighter. Suddenly, Hujia and others beside Xiao Yan showed solemn expressions on their faces, but Xiao Yan remained calm and turned his gaze to the two people in the front. Although in the eyes of others, the momentum of those two people was the weakest and could not even be felt, Xiao Yan could detect that these two people were both at the Douling level. Looking at the two unfamiliar people, Xiao Yan secretly thought in his heart that it was indeed different from the previous life, but he still said lightly with a bit of a smile, "You guys should be the two teams of black and white, right? I wonder if the seniors have enough fire energy?" Hearing Xiao Yan's somewhat arrogant words, the two leaders also narrowed their eyes slightly. The young man in black clothes in front of them gave them a very heavy momentum, even compared to some famous people in the inner courtyard. The strong ones are not much different. But even so, the two people who have been in the arena all year round believe that they have the strength to fight and do not think that they will lose. The young man holding the spear said calmly, "Captain Heisha, Luo Sha, 2-star fighting spirit." As soon as he finished speaking, his momentum exploded. The faces of Hujia and others immediately turned pale. This wasn't the end of it. On the other side, the long-haired young man also took a step forward and said with a bit of a smile, "Captain Baisha, Lin Feng, 3-star fighting spirit." The momentum of the two people exploded together, and they pressed towards Xiao Yan, while the latter chuckled lightly, and then his whole body was shocked. He no longer concealed his cultivation and said with a slight smile, "Both of you, please." Faced with Xiao Yan's arrogant invitation to fight, the two of them did not hesitate at all. With the idea of teaching these daring freshmen a lesson, they immediately joined forces to attack. Not only that, but several team members behind them also attacked together, rushing towards Shunair, Wu Hao, Baishan, Hujia, and others. But before they could get closer, they heard two muffled sounds coming from the battle group on the side. Then, the two figures who had just jumped out took a few steps back at an astonishing speed and returned to the formation in a slightly embarrassed manner. He was the captain of the black and white Shuangsha team. The first moment he came into contact with Xiao Yan, he was directly repulsed. Such an unbelievable turn of events not only surprised the members of the black and white Shuangxia team present, but also aroused the exclamations of the general onlookers by the lake. The freshmen were too far away and did not hear the self-introductions of the black and white Shuangxia captains. Although this caused a stir, it was not that serious. It was just that half of them were robbed of the fire energy in turn. The old student, with his pupils shrunken, looked at the scene in front of him in disbelief, as if he had fallen into a hallucination. How can this Xiao Yan be so strong? Isn't he the first to join the fighting spirit? Suddenly, there was an exclamation, and when the words came out, he realized that he had attracted attention and immediately covered his mouth. But no one seemed to care about his actions at this time. These old students all know that the strength of Luo Sha and Lin Feng, who are among the top 100 figures in the inner courtyard, are indeed beaten by this kid who has not yet entered the inner courtyard. Suffered a loss? It's incredible! Xiao Yan smiled slightly, made an invitation to fight gesture toward Luo Sha and Lin Feng, and said lightly, "Two seniors, you should use your full strength. Otherwise, the scene may not be very good." Seeing Xiao Yan being so calm, for a moment even with the tempers of Luo Sha and Lin Feng, their faces couldn't help but darken. At the same time, they also stared at Xiao Yan deeply, and then Lin Feng murmured in a low voice, "It's really a monster." Luo Sha on the side was also deeply aware that the other party had already brought such tremendous pressure to them before they entered the inner courtyard. If they were promoted quickly after entering the inner courtyard to practice, I am afraid that those at the top of the rankings would be. It can also have the power to fight. Such a gap in talent makes people doubt themselves. Taking a deep breath, Rosa raised the spear in her hand and shouted, "Be careful!" As the words fell, fighting energy gathered in his body. And then he took a step forward, and the fine iron spear in his hand immediately turned into countless gun shadows, with flashing electric light, and rushed towards Xiao Yan with shocking power. During this period, a pair of pale silver fighting spirit armor had condensed on his body at some point. With Luo Sha's sudden advance, ravines were formed on the ground by the wind pressure. Thunder Spear, kill! Luo Sha used his killing move, and Lin Feng on the side was not to be outdone. Under the gathering fighting spirit, countless water vapor condensed around his body. About half a second later, along with the extremely fast seals, countless water flows gathered together, condensing too powerful, the water snake, which was 7 to 8 feet tall, blasted towards the direction of Xiao Yan. Twin water dragons smashed them. Two extremely powerful attacks, one after the other, were cleverly connected, blocking all possible places for Xiao Yan to dodge, and blasted towards him. At this moment, above the huge trees, the two elders of Canaan Academy who were watching the battle also chuckled and stroked their beards. The elder in blue looked at the scene below with a slight smile, and said, "Haha, it seems that the outcome is decided, Lao Su. You are going to lose a good thing to me." Although Xiao Yan's strength is tyrannical, he is too trusting. If he had summoned the Douqi armor from the beginning, he would definitely be the winner. But now he is caught off guard when faced with two mysterious, high-level explosive fighting skills. It's enough to defeat him. After hearing such words, Elder Su was indeed calm and said calmly, "Don't be impatient. Victory and defeat are majestic. I believe in Xiao Yan." Just as he finished speaking, the battle situation below changed again in an instant. Seeing two terrifying attacks, Xiao Yan did not dodge, but raised the corners of his mouth slightly, with a little smile raised his right hand. The punch came, and then he took a step forward. Fighting energy gathered from his feet, waist, and back. The energy from all parts of the body merged together, and then a fierce punch was suddenly blasted out. "Belong fist! Break it for me!" In an instant, 3 attacks were handed over, and then in an instant, the countless gun shadows in the sky were directly defeated, and the 2 huge water snakes suddenly exploded, turning into countless water droplets, splashing on the ground, and dry land gets wet. With 1 against 2, Xiao Yan defeated 2 major killing moves with 1 punch, but that was not all. While everyone was stunned, a black shadow shot out at extremely fast speeds, spanning more than 10 meters in an instant. The distance appeared in front of Luo Sha and Lin Feng, and then in the terrifying eyes of the 2 people, each punched. Boom! Two dull sounds sounded, and Luosha and Linfeng flew out like kites with broken strings, hitting the ground heavily, and they lost their ability to fight for a while. Facing the horrified black and white Shuangsha team members, Xiao Yan cupped his hands and said calmly, "I also ask all seniors to hand over the Fire Energy Crystal card." The old students looked at each other with a wry smile, and in desperation, under Xiao Yan's pressure, they reluctantly handed over the Fire Energy Crystal card. As the winner of this fire energy hunting competition, each of the freshmen present will be rewarded with an additional 20 days of fire energy. As for the 5 members of Xiao Yan's team, in addition, they will be rewarded with blue fire crystal cards again. After hearing what Elder Su finally announced, countless freshmen hugged each other excitedly and cheered loudly. On the other side, the defeated old students were dejected. In addition to losing their fire energy, they were also beaten violently by the freshmen. But it can be said that the body and mind have received double damage. After many freshmen calmed down, Elder Su looked around with a little smile, which was in sharp contrast to the elder in blue, who thought his face was not so good, and led many students towards the inner courtyard. "Go!" Xiao Yan slowly stretched his body and looked into the distance with some expectation. This was not his first time on this road. The scenes he had walked through here in his previous life were still vivid in his mind. The corners of his mouth raised, with a bit of anticipation for the long-lost college life, Xiao Yan murmured, "Long time no see, I really miss you." This gravel staircase is not very high. In just a minute or two, Xiao Yan and others climbed to the last level, and then with a lift of their bodies, they stood on the hillside. With their eyes swept away before, they appeared in the field of vision. The sight made them take a breath of cold air involuntarily. Behind the hillside, there was an extremely huge sunken basin, as if a huge meteorite fell from the sky and was smashed out. Within the basin, there are many tall buildings. Looking from a high position, you can see black shadows like fleas constantly flickering and jumping on the buildings. As your eyes spread forward, you will find that the area of this Bex's basin is huge. It's a bit surprising. When the line of sight reaches the end, it can still only see tall buildings and lush greenery. "Is this the inner courtyard?" some freshmen exclaimed, looking like bumpkins who had entered the city. However, the old students on the side did not laugh at this, because they were also so amazed when they entered the inner courtyard for the first time. Under the leadership of Elder Su, the freshmen entered the inner courtyard. After first registering their identities, under the leadership of some old students, they each found a place to stay and separated. As for the 5 Xiao Yans, they were arranged in a 2-story 4-corner attic under the personal leadership of Elder Su. Compared with the place where other freshmen lived, it was undoubtedly much more luxurious. Beishan refused to stay here because he also had a cousin with considerable strength in the inner courtyard. Not only was he famous on the list, but he had also established a big force. After some consideration, Beishan decided to follow his cousin. Regarding his invitation, Xiao Yan naturally chose to refuse. Living under the fence was not what Xiao Yan liked. However, unlike the previous life, Baishan did not betray or be jealous of Xiao Yan, and Xiao Yan naturally did not become his enemy. Reason. Faced with Baishan's invitation, Shunair naturally followed Xiao Yan. Wherever the latter went, Shunair went, and the two were almost inseparable. As for Hu Jia and Wu Hao, after hesitating for a while, they also rejected Baishan's proposal. The former also had the same reason as Xiao Yan and did not like to live under the fence. As for Wu Hao, after seeing Xiao Yan's methods, he was eager to give it a try. "I want to wait for a breakthrough before fighting him." Without winning over anyone, Baishan had no choice but to leave. However, Xiao Yan and the others welcomed Baishan back as guests at any time. After all, they were teammates and had a friendship. After finishing their work, they sat down. After a few days of exhaustion, everyone also fell into a deep sleep. At night, the silver moon hung high, and the faint moonlight shone from the sky, covering the entire huge basin in the moonlight, mows and defluent of lost for moonlight. However, in this silent night, Xiao Yan did not fall asleep peacefully. Instead, he sat cross-legged in the room, forming cultivation seals with his hands. As his breathing circulated, wisps of energy visible to the naked eye emanated from the space. Come out, and finally follow the breath, and be naturally absorbed into his body. Xiao Yan, there are traces of the fallen heart flames in Canaan College. I plan to search for them, so don't worry. Yao Lao's voice suddenly sounded from the bottom of Xiao Yan's heart, and then an illusory figure faintly appeared in the room. However, facing Yao Lao's approach, Xiao Yan did not agree but spoke with a chuckle. Road. Teacher, there is no need to take risks. This disciple should know where the fallen heart flame is now. Hearing Xiao Yan's words, Yao Lao was slightly startled. Then he seemed to have remembered something and quickly asked, "Is it from that magical dream of yours?" Hearing Yao Lao's words, Xiao Yan also nodded. After all, it was impossible for him to directly tell his experience in the previous life, so he had to use this as an excuse. Yes, teacher. In that dream, I also went to Canaan College one after another and finally found the fallen heart flame, which is under the dark tower in the northwest. That black tower, called the Tianfenqi Refining Tower, is one of the most important facilities in the inner courtyard of Canaan College. Speaking in a low voice, Xiao Yan slowly told the information he knew about the inside of Canaan College one by one, deleting some unreasonable parts. Yao Lao also listened very carefully, and he couldn't help but caress the palms of his hands. Beard. Finally, after Xiao Yan finished speaking, Yao Lao nodded thoughtfully and then said, "In this case, we don't have to be impatient. Xiao Yan, just stay in Canaan College for a while and try your best to make breakthroughs in your cultivation. Then we can go after the fallen Xinyan." Hearing Yao Lao's words, Xiao Yan also smiled and said, yes. Yao Lao lost his target and once again turned into a line of smoke and dissipated, returning to Xiao Yan's ring. As for Xiao Yan, after Yao Lao returned, he sat alone in the room, under the moonlight, and kept stroking the dark Naji in his hand. After a long time, he let out a long sigh. In the early morning, the sun broke through the fog and shone on the flat land, coating everything with a thin film of light. Many disciples in the inner courtyard walked out of their rooms in the morning and began to practice as if no one else was around. Everyone here is a carefully selected genius, and once they are selected, they will be surpassed. When Xiao Yan walked out of the room in high spirits, he saw Wu Hao and Hu Jia already in the courtyard, starting to sparring with each other. It's good to be young. With a sigh, Xiao Yan had no intention of joining in. In the past, he would do morning exercises, but today it was an accident because Xiao Yan clearly remembered something that would happen today in his previous life. Slowly walking out of the door, Xiao Yan raised his eyes and saw two freshmen with angry and aggrieved faces running towards here. There were still a few bruises on their bodies, and they looked a bit messy. "It's like someone just hit me." Before they could get closer, Xiao Yan tapped his feet, and in a few seconds, he appeared beside them and said calmly, "You guys tell me, what happened?" Although he knew what happened, he still had to pretend. As for the two freshmen, they were slightly startled at first, but when they saw the figure appearing next to them, they immediately became excited and quickly said, "I've seen Boss Xiao Yan, and it's like this. There is a group of old students who sign up for the group to bully us freshmen, and they also say that we have to pay tribute fees." Soon, the two freshmen told each other what happened, while Xiao Yan stood with his hands behind his back and said calmly, "Lead the way." Because Xiao Yan was invited to take action, the two freshmen, whose faces were red and extremely excited, also quickly told Xiao Yan the cause of the incident on the road. Although he already knew what happened, Xiao Yan did not stop him from telling the story, otherwise he would not be able to explain how he knew. Xiao Yan is also familiar with one of the freshmen with a flat head. In his last life, he was also the first freshman to follow him in the inner courtyard of Canaan College. At this moment, he said with excitement, "Since this morning, there has been a group of old students blocking the door of our freshman area, preventing us from going out. They are also yelling about paying freshman tribute fees. Each person has 2 days of fire energy because of the boss Xiao Yan. Leader, our freshmen are richer this time, and we know that newcomers must abide by the rules, so we also handed over the tribute fee to them."
But we didn't expect that apart from them, several groups of people would come, blocking the exits to prevent us freshmen from entering and exiting and forcing us to pay the tribute fee again. So far, 3 or 4 groups have come, but in fact, the previous rules of the inner court stated that a maximum of 2 batches would be enough. After hearing what Artai said, Xiao Yan also nodded, then stretched out his hand, patted the latter's shoulder gently, and said lightly with a bit of smile, "What did I think it was? It turns out that they are just a bunch of scum who only know how to bully the weak." In fact, just as Xiao Yan said, although the group of inner courtyard students who receive tribute fees from new students or old students, They are not very powerful figures in the inner courtyard, and their power is not that big. Xiao Yan knows very well that if you are short of fire energy, you can get a lot of life energy by making contributions, completing tasks issued by the academy, or going to the arena to fight to improve your ranking, which is far more than squeezing ordinary freshmen. Want more and faster? The real strong men in the inner court don't even bother to do this. But why do they continue to squeeze? In the final analysis, they are just because they have no strength and can only bully the weak. Xiao Yan has never had a good impression of such people. But, Senior Xiao Yan, is it a little dangerous for you to be alone? There are many of them. Our tie was affirmed by Xiao Yan and was patted on the shoulder by him. He was a little flattered. After the indignation subsided, a feeling of worry also rose involuntarily. If Xiao Yan was injured by those old students from the inner courtyard because he stood up for them, they would probably die of shame. Hearing our Tai's words, Xiao Yan also laughed dumbly. It had been a long time since he heard someone tell him that he should be careful. Now that he thinks about it, it still feels a bit cordial. After